When did I switch to EV? Today.
For me, driving an electric vehicle was really a dream come true.
Main reason for switching was that I felt that's the future.
I love how quiet the car is.
Bonjour.
Hello.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hi, buenas noches.
I did not know I will ever drive one. And it happened the possibility for drivers on Uber to rent a car.
Every day I see the gas prices.
It's a hectic situation.
I notice a lot more EVs on the road.
Zero emissions is good for everybody.
We all have to care about the environment. Sometimes they said, whatever you do is not going to make a difference. Yes, I think it makes a difference. At least little by little.
It's like, I feel like I'm doing my part and then setting an example for everybody. Really, electric is the way to go.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Go Get Zero. This is our first ever sustainable product event, and where better to have this event than London, where Uber's journey towards sustainability began just 4 years ago when we launched our Clean Air Plan to help drivers transition to cleaner vehicles. Now, driving emissions to zero, I believe, is the defining challenge of our generation. It's a challenge that's bigger than Uber, and it's one that involves many, many people here in this room and all around the world. And London today is the leader in electrification. Our London riders experience the greenest ways to use Uber in the world: by electric car, by bike, by scooter, hybrid boat, coach, and now even the Eurostar. And that's no accident. World-leading policies in London and the UK to lower emissions and clean up transportation have had a significant impact and are having a significant impact as we speak today. And Uber, on our part, has really leaned in. We've invested £5 million in charging infrastructure in London. We've created our own clean air plan, and we've rolled out Uber Green so that riders in London can now request an electric vehicle at zero additional cost. And this has helped get more than 10,000 drivers in electric vehicles in the capital today, which is awesome. And our experience in London has set the stage for us now to begin to scale electrification on a global basis. Here you can see behind me just how fast electric vehicles on Uber are growing. We've tripled the number of electric vehicles on our platform just in the last year alone. And last month we were thrilled to pass the milestone now of having more than 60,000 drivers, you saw some of them in that video, going electric across North America and Europe. And in North America today, about 1 in 20 EV miles are on Uber. In major cities in Europe, now about 1 in 10 miles are electric. And right here in London, we're very close to reaching nearly 1 in 5 miles in electric vehicles, which really leads the whole world, which is pretty awesome. And if you look now, the Uber drivers have become the world's early adopters to electrification, moving electric 5 times faster than the average drivers out there. And as you can imagine, the average Uber driver drives a lot more miles than the average driver out there, creating an outsized impact as our drivers go green. To some extent, our drivers on Uber are the first people that we should be targeting to go green because of that outsized impact as they switch over to an electric vehicle. This has allowed us at Uber to launch a suite of products that offer low or zero emission rides now in more than 200 cities all around the world. more than 10 million EV trips happened on Uber this last month alone. And many riders tell me that the first time that they've ever experienced kind of the electric experience being in an electric car is actually on Uber, because as you can imagine, with the audience that we have, that first experience, that first delightful experience with green, more and more is happening on Uber. And the first time that you try electric, you become much more likely to try an electric vehicle in your personal life, whether it's buying an electric vehicle or electing to use Uber Green whenever you use our service. Now, this is a ton of progress, but we all know that there is so much more that all of us have to do in order to reach our sustainability goals. And that's why we're back again in London today to embark on the next phase of our green journey. First, I'm incredibly excited to announce that we're now bringing Uber Eats into our sustainability mission. And we're doing so in two ways. We're setting two goals. First of all, we're setting a goal to get 100% of couriers now to use zero-emission vehicles by 2040 all over the globe. Second, we're committing by 2030 to end all unnecessary plastic waste on Uber Eats. Getting your food is great on demand, but getting it in plastic containers, etc., is not so great, and we want to end that. Now this, I have to tell you, is going to be very, very difficult. It's a big challenge for us. Lowering emissions on Eats is very much a natural extension of our own commitments going forward that we started with rides, but tackling plastics and waste is a whole new ballgame for us. We've already started. I've always said that climate is a team sport, and we've teamed up with a number of leading companies all around the world. But we believe, and we invite now, every single delivery business in the world has to tackle plastic waste along with us. We're the first global delivery platform to set this kind of a goal, to go green, but we certainly should not be the last. Because let's face it, the world is absolutely not making the transition to green fast enough. Today, it's too often too hard to go green. EVs are still too expensive. Charging is still too confusing. People worry about the availability of charging. Is it going to be there when I need it? And making the choice to go green in packaging is often too difficult. At Uber, what we need to accomplish is to make it absolutely effortless. And Uber has a unique role to play because unlike other global technology companies, we don't just operate in the digital world. We have our feet firmly grounded in the more than 10,000 cities that we serve today, with 1 million trips happening on our platform every hour, every day of every year. If you think about it, originally Uber was founded on the idea of making it absolutely easy for you to get from point A to B. Now we have to make it easier for the 130 million people who are coming onto our platform on a monthly basis to get from A to B, but in an environmentally sustainable manner. That's going to be the North Star that we're going to aim for across the company. We're going to make it easier to drive green. We're going to make it easier to ride green. And soon, we're going to make it incredibly easy for you to find and order food in green packaging as well. That's the North Star that we're trying to achieve. So today, what this event is all about and what we're incredibly excited for is to give you a preview of what's to come on our Uber system. Everyone should be able to live a low emissions lifestyle. And what we can do at Uber is to make it affordable, convenient, and in a uniquely Uber way, absolutely effortless. So now I'm going to hand it over to Sachin Kansal so that he can show you how we're starting to design sustainability right into our driver app. Thank you.
Thank you, Dara. Hi, everyone. My name is Sachin Kansal, and I'm Vice President of Product Management, responsible for our driver products, which includes our efforts to go green. Now, the most important thing that we can do to realize the vision that Dara laid out is to help Uber drivers convert to electric vehicles. Now, we already have a start on that. You saw the video with 60,000 drivers, and we are moving faster than the general market. But with millions of drivers on our platform, we still have a long way to go. So how are we going to do it? We have asked drivers, and they've told us that it's not easy for them to go electric. 76% of them have said that EVs are expensive. And close to 60% of them are concerned about charging. They are concerned about downtime, about losing their earnings, and so on. And 10% of them find themselves to be unfamiliar with EVs. These are real, valid problems. I'm an Uber driver as well. I've been driving for several years on Uber. And so far, I've been driving my gas-operated vehicle. And I just added an EV to my Uber account. So I'll have to change my habits. I'll have to worry about charging, and I'll have to worry about when and where. And those are complicated things. It should not be so complicated. At Uber, we want to make going green as effortless as possible. So how do we do that? Last year, we introduced an EV hub in the driver app, which is a one-stop shop for all things electric vehicles, where drivers are able to get information about various topics like charging and maintenance and costs and so on. They can also see videos of drivers who have already converted to EVs. And the guidance that they can get from experienced drivers is extremely valuable, and they can trust it, which is why we have started a program called EV Ambassadors, where experienced drivers who already have EVs can provide guidance to others. In fact, we have some of our EV ambassadors from London right here in the front row. So let's please give them a big round of applause. They are the real trailblazers in this journey towards all zero emission. Now, if you ask them, they'll tell you that one of the big problems that drivers are worried about is cost. So in addition to guidance from them, we are also making it easy in the app for drivers to be able to compare costs. So let's say if I'm trying to decide, should I get a gas vehicle? Should I get an EV? Let's say maybe a Tesla Model 3. What should I do? When I see the initial price, I get a bit of a sticker shock because it is expensive. But what is important is for us to look at the total cost of ownership over time. And there I see I'm actually saving money on gas. Maintenance is cheaper. So over the lifetime, the Tesla Model 3 is actually a pretty good deal. And so understanding the costs is very important. We are also spending a lot of time on initiatives to reduce the financial burden on drivers by providing assistance and incentives wherever we can. For example, here in London, we have the Clean Air Plan, and in Paris, we have the Electric Mobility Fund, where drivers earn credits for every trip they do before they get an EV, and these credits can only be used for the purchase or rental of an electric vehicle. In the United States, drivers get $1 extra per trip that they complete on an electric vehicle. And then in many countries around the world, we have incentives and discounts, such as discounts on our service fee, as well as discounts on charging and on cars. We want to increase their take-home pay as they use an EV. But in total, we are investing more than $800 million to help drivers go electric. And that is making a real difference, including all the drivers, thousands of drivers who have already converted. Now, in addition to incentives, we also have to make it easy for them to get their hands on an electric vehicle. So in the app, driver can just go into what we call a vehicle marketplace, and they can search for an electric vehicle. Maybe they're looking for a short-term rental. For example, a Tesla through our partnership with Hertz. This is a program that we started in the US, and now we have expanded in Canada and Europe. And it's been very, very popular. And thousands of drivers have used it. And the reason we have been able to scale it is because of deep technical integration we have done with Hertz. So a driver can just tap a button, they can reserve a Tesla, they can show up at the branch, and they can pick it up. We have made it very, very easy. And after they have had the rental experience, if they then want to go after long-term ownership, we want to be there right there with them. And they can go to the purchase tab, and they can see leasing and purchase options. And all of this is possible because of deep partnerships that we have with rental companies, fleet providers, and OEMs. Just last week, we announced a partnership with Ford, So they can provide flexible leases to drivers in California for the Ford Mach-E, which is a great car. Doing all of this in the app is great, but sometimes you need a hands-on experience. So we have scaled Go Electric events in many cities around the world where drivers actually get to test drive these vehicles, and they get to talk to our EV ambassadors. So all in all, a lot of effort for us to convert drivers to electric. Now let's say that driver is able to rent or buy an EV and they're ready to put it on their Uber account. That is just the beginning of their journey, not the end of their journey, because there's still a huge question around charging. As we discussed, close to 60% of drivers are concerned about charging. So let's talk about that, because most of the drivers don't have access to a charger at home, and they have to rely on public charging. So we're going to share with you a tale of two drivers, Daniel and Paula. I thought since I'm in London, I can throw in a Charles Dickens reference with a tale of two of our drivers. So we'll start with Daniel. Now, Daniel, when he used to drive his Toyota Corolla, life was very easy. When he was at 1/4 gas tank, he would go to a gas station, he would fill gas, and in 2 minutes, he's back on the road. But now that he has an EV, he has to come up with a new strategy. And right now, his strategy is, whenever I'm at 30% charge, I'm going to go find a charger, and I'm going to recharge my car. Well, he can run into some issues with that. For example, he goes to a charger, but he's in a 30-minute line at a fast charger. Or he may end up at a charger which has the wrong connector, and he does not have an adapter for that. Or he may be charging his car when Uber has high demand, he's missing out on a lot of earnings and surge. Or he may get an offer that looks like this. This is what a driver offer looks like in the driver app. This offer is for 75 pounds. That's a very attractive ride. But he doesn't feel he can take it because that's 61 kilometers. He doesn't know if he has enough charge for that. These are real issues which cause charging anxiety as well as suboptimal earnings. So if we break that down, there are really two issues. When should I charge and where should I charge? So why does when do I charge matter? Well, charging costs fluctuate during the day. Also, the demand levels and the earnings levels on the Uber network fluctuate during the day. And I may have some personal commitments. I may want to drop off my kids to school, and then I have to worry about, should I charge before that, after that, and so on. So there are many, many questions to answer. And why does where matter? Chargers are different. There are fast chargers, there are slow chargers, there are chargers with the wrong connectors, as you just saw, as well as I may have a membership with a certain charging provider, but I may not be anywhere close to that charging provider right now. And these are really important problems for us to solve, and without solving them, we can't make getting to EVs as effortless as it should be. Let's now turn our attention to our second driver, Paula. Now, she's very excited about her new Kia EV. She's been having fun driving it. She doesn't have a charger at home either, so she has to charge when she's out and about. We do provide her an EV charging map in the app, so she can just hit the search button. She can look for any business like a search app. She can also look for EV chargers, and she can see all the EV chargers around her. If it's a single bolt, it's a slow charger. If it's a double bolt, it's a fast charger. She can select any one of them, and we can provide her information like location, hours of operation, but also real-time availability and pricing. So this is a pretty handy tool for her in the app, but she still has to make a decision of when and where. We are not providing her guidance for that. We want to change that now. So let's say one day she opens her app and she sees this message, say goodbye to range anxiety. Uber would like to connect to her Kia. And we are asking her to provide access to her vehicle's battery data, which will unlock smart charging features. That's intriguing to her, so she provides us the consent, and then we start the connection and the authenticating process with her car. Let's say we are able to make that connection, so that's great. And when we make that connection, we are able to retrieve the battery information from her car and give her a real-time snapshot right here in terms of what is her charge level, as well as how many more kilometers she can do. That's pretty cool for us to be able to show that, but that is just a starting point. What more can we do when we have that information? So let's walk through that. She wakes up one morning, she gets in the car, it's a cloudy London morning, and she drops off her daughter at school, and then she goes online. When she goes online, she gets a message, plan your charging break. She's excited about that because she's a planner. Rather than worrying about charging all day, she'd rather know, oh, I have to stop at a certain time for charging. So she says yes. And we ask her, how long do you plan to drive today? She says, I plan to drive till about 7 p.m. Already in the app, we show her her projected earnings levels throughout the day based on historical earnings data. So she knows when to drive, where to drive. Now, in addition to that, we are going to show her the charging costs throughout the day because they fluctuate during the day. And also, we're going to show how her battery level goes down because we know that she's going to be driving till 7 p.m. Based on all of that information, we make a recommendation that you should be charging at 3 p.m. because we know that the earnings level at that time is relatively lower and the charging cost is lower, so her opportunity cost is lower. She may want to try out, hey, what about 2 p.m.? Well, you still have enough charge at that time. What about 4 p.m.? Commute time, traffic starts at that time, so she'll be missing out on a lot of earnings if it is 4 p.m. So she settles for 3 p.m. She confirms that, and now she can be at peace. She knows when she is going to be charging the car. And we'll be watching out for that in case something changes. Let's say she ends up driving more than we expected. We can always send her a message and change that. So she starts her day, and she goes and provides trips to riders, and her earnings are stacking up, and her battery level is going down. After a few hours, she's at 42%. Now, she's new to EV, so anytime it goes below 50%, that makes her nervous. Should I actually go charge now rather than waiting for 3 p.m.? So we need to be with her, not just at the initial planning stage, but through every step in the journey. So when she finishes her next trip, she sees a charging widget at the bottom. Right now, that widget is green, so nothing to worry about. She's in the safe zone. We tell her and remind her, you still have more than 80 kilometers to go, and depending on London averages, that means about 3 to 5 trips. So she feels at peace, and she can keep driving. And now she drives more, and her battery level keeps going down. And after some time, it's at 22%. That's definitely in the orange zone. So now the charging widget says, you're in the orange zone. You have a few kilometers left. Now, this is the tricky point. What should happen at that point? Now, what if, at that point, she gets a trip that looks like this? It's a very juicy trip, 72 pounds. She would be very tempted to take it. But if she takes that, that may put her out of the city and away from any chargers, and that's 56 kilometers. So what should happen? Well, we are not going to send her that trip. Drivers have told us that this is one of their biggest pain points when they're driving an EV. They see a trip like that, they would be tempted, they will accept it, and later when they realize they may have to cancel, or even worse, they may have to abort the trip midway, which is a bad experience for everyone. So this trip just would not happen. Now, does that mean she should not be getting any trip at all? Absolutely not. There are still several trips that would make sense to her. For example, this one. It's a short trip. She can do it, and it puts her right close to the chargers. We call this battery-aware matching. And she sees on the offer card that this is the last trip before charging, which gives her confidence that Uber knows my battery level and is sending me appropriate trips. This is very, very important. She can accept the trip without any hesitation or fear, and she can go through with that trip. And when she completes this, now she's absolutely in the red zone. And she has to go and charge. It's also close to 3 p.m. We give her a recommendation for a charger depending on where she is and the costs, and maybe she has a certain connector. And she can, at that point, navigate to that charger. When she gets there, she can plug into the charger. And in the app, she'll be able to track what her battery level is. And when she has that downtime of 30 minutes at that fast charger, she can use the app. Maybe she finds a place to get some coffee, and she can truly relax. And she's thinking, perhaps this EV thing is not as hard as I thought. And perhaps you can go green, and it still can be effortless. Now, in order for us to make this effortless for drivers like her and Daniel and millions of other drivers, we are doing a lot behind the scenes. We talked about being able to retrieve the battery level from her car. We do that by connecting to her car in a secure way through the cloud and, of course, with her permission. Connected cars are a big part of this future, and we are enabling that. We are also connecting with many other third parties, including charge point providers, so we have real-time information about availability and cost so we can make the right recommendation. And it's important for us to send her the right trips, as we saw. There are many trip requests that are happening around her, but there are some that will not make sense to her. So as part of battery-aware matching, we make sure she gets the right trips. And finally, the technology that we use to recommend to her when and where she should be charging takes a lot of inputs, demand levels and cost of charging, what her battery level is, and so on. But it has one simple output, which is based on us maximizing her earnings. So here's a summary of all the things that we are providing to drivers so that they can go electric. We have talked about these. Some of these are already available, and some of them will be available in the next few months. These features are critical, but the goal of these features is to increase their earnings and to reduce their downtime and their costs so that driving an EV can become a no-brainer and the day-to-day management can be as effortless as possible. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Divya to talk about maps.
Hi everyone, I'm Divya Dalapati and I run our Maps team. Our mapping technology works hard to constantly balance dozens of factors in real time to get you that easy ride or quick delivery. We are talking pickups, drop-offs, time, distance, tolls, road closures, literally trillions of GPS points each year and more. But starting last year, we tried something a little different. We began considering the emissions associated with a particular route. And after some analysis in partnership with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, we found that 1 in every 3 routes have a more fuel-efficient alternative without increasing the time or fare of that trip. So we established a new default algorithm for our routes, one that optimizes for trip distance, elevation, and speed, all things that impact emissions. For example, an eco-friendly route may avoid a hill or a street with a lot of stoplights, but will still get you where you need to be at the same time for the same cost. And all those savings really, all these small savings really add up. Since we have made this update in North America, it's already helped our drivers avoid 9,800 metric tons of carbon or 4.2 million liters of gasoline. We think this is worth celebrating. So this week, we began letting our riders know when they are on an eco-friendly route. They'll see this notification right in their app. It's a win, win, win. Drivers save on gas, riders get the same price for their ride, and we lower emissions in a way that it feels effortless. And we need more wins on climate. The next one is all about airports. Trips to or from the airport represent about 15% of our business. Airport trips also tend to be longer than an average Uber ride, meaning the emissions impact is even more substantial. That's why we are teaming up with airports around the world to introduce Green Curb, a series of perks for our riders and drivers to encourage them to go green at the airport. For riders who choose green products, they'll get lower fares, exclusive access to curbside pickup zones in preferred locations. And for drivers, this partnership means we are offering access to convenient, discounted, or even free fast chargers in the driver waiting lot. And now this will look different in different locations. We'll start in the US with Portland Airport, Phoenix Sky Harbor, and internationally with Madrid Barajas Airport, and right here in London at Heathrow. And we invite every airport to partner with us so that we can cut emissions together. Now over to Jen to share our rider updates.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Yu, and I lead product for rides here at Uber. You've heard about the great work that we're doing for drivers in support of sustainability. And now we're going to talk more about what we're doing on the consumer side, specifically to make it easier for riders to live a low-emission lifestyle. Let me show you how we're going to do that. Over the last 4 years, we've been working on developing a full suite of sustainable products for our riders, starting with Uber Green. Uber Green allows you to ride an EV or a hybrid for just about the same price as an UberX. We first launched Uber Green in cities like Paris and London, and it's now available in over 140 cities, and as of today, we're live in cities across Australia. Now, in countries where EVs aren't yet widely available, we introduced a new product called Uber Planet, where riders can pay a little extra to help offset the emissions from that trip. And today, Planet is available in more than 80 cities around the world. And just last year, most recently, we launched a product called Comfort Electric, which now allows you to ride in a premium EV, like a Tesla, a Polestar, or a Mach. So that's a great start. But we want to go a step further now and really nurture the behavior by encouraging and celebrating users when they make these greener choices. And later this year, we're going to introduce an experience in the app where we start showing riders the emissions that they saved and also helping translate that into the impact that they're having. And they're going to be able to access all of that directly in the app. So let me tell you how that works. Olivia just finished a trip with an Uber Green. She gets a notification, and it tells her that she saved 613 grams of carbon by taking the Uber Green instead of an UberX. That's great to hear. Olivia is making a greener choice, so we're really going to celebrate that. She then heads to the emission savings page in her Uber app, and she now sees that she's saved over 5,000 grams of carbon since January. So what does that really mean, though? Is that a lot? Is that a little? We really want to translate that for Olivia and give her some more context. First, we see that she's taken 12 rides this year, which puts her in the top 10% of green riders. Go Olivia. And secondly, we can convert her emission savings to something a bit more specific and tangible, like savings on coal or petrol. Now, Olivia also likes to feel like she's part of something much bigger than herself. She sees that riders in her city of London have saved nearly 4 million kilograms of carbon this year alone. That's amazing. That's like the equivalent of getting 1,500 petrol-powered cars off of the streets completely. And Olivia is competitive, so she's thrilled to see that her city of London is way ahead of Paris and San Francisco. We want Olivia to feel proud of her positive impact, and we hope that her next trip is also going to be an Uber Green. But that's not the only option for Olivia. We also offer a product called UberX Share, which allows you to share your ride while also cutting emissions and saving money. Today, we're expanding UberX Share to 18 more cities to make it the most widely available ride sharing in the world, sharing in more than 50 cities. We believe that sharing is caring, and we're going to continue to innovate on this front. However, let's remember, not every occasion calls for a car. Living a low-emissions lifestyle also means going car-free when you can, whether it's taking a bike to work, a scooter to get coffee, or maybe even walking to get dinner with friends. Today, through our partnership with Lime, we offer e-bikes and e-scooters in more than 200 cities around the world. And we just announced a new bike partnership with Tembisi in Latin America. And we're so thrilled to announce that soon we're going to be expanding that partnership with Tembisi to Chile so that more riders around the world have more ways to go car-free. Now, we all know that there are moments when you just want to drive yourself. And that's one reason why Uber recently acquired a company called Car Next Door, a car-sharing platform in Australia that was expressly founded to free the world from the one person, one car mentality. Car Next Door is now called Uber Carshare, and today we're announcing that we'll soon be launching for the first time in North America, starting in Boston and Toronto. Plus, you can also borrow an electric vehicle on the Uber Carshare platform. Just because you need a car sometimes just doesn't mean that you need to own a car. One ride at a time, one user at a time, one vehicle at a time, we're working to unbundle the culture of personal car ownership. We believe at Uber that the future is shared, it's electric, and at times it's car-free. And we're determined to make that experience for consumers way more effortless and way more accessible than ever. So with that, I'm now going to hand it over to Sandeep Jain, our Chief Product Officer. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. And hello, everyone. My name is Sandeep Jain. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Uber. It's great to be with you today. You've heard a lot about how we're building sustainability into our core experiences. We spoke about drivers, we spoke about riders, we spoke about plastics and delivery. But let's talk a little bit more about what it means for Uber Eats, for both emissions and plastics, because that is going to be a big job. The good news is much of what we have learned about helping drivers go electric will also be relevant for Uber Eats. We have a strong base upon which to build. Many of our couriers are already using bikes, e-bikes, e-mopeds. The potential here is huge. Just last spring, we surpassed 7 billion Eats deliveries worldwide. 7 billion. What an impact we can have by helping every one of those couriers go electric. We'll start by expanding our two-wheel partnerships with Human Forest, Zumo, Gogoro, and others globally to help lower the cost of going electric. But our newest and biggest challenge, and Dara spoke about this earlier, will be on packaging. As you all know, single-use plastics are having devastating impacts on our oceans and the environment. It's an issue that's much bigger than Uber. It's an issue that's much bigger than the food delivery industry. We work with nearly 1 million restaurants, and that's a growing number, who all make decisions on packaging they use on every single order. We want to help every single one of those restaurants move to more sustainable packaging through partnerships, discounts, incentives. Now, needless to say, we can't tackle this alone. We're partnering with World Wildlife Fund to help us understand these issues and more deeply understand how Uber can use its scale to help. Many of our biggest restaurant partners are already reducing packaging waste. But for most restaurants, the cost of sustainable packaging is still much too high. That's why we offer discounts on recyclable, reusable, and compostable packaging to all Uber restaurants in the US as well as much of Europe and Asia. And we'll keep expanding these partnerships to make it accessible and affordable to all of these restaurants. We also want to make it easier for consumers to make greener choices in Uber Eats. Just like we earlier spoke about drivers and riders, we spoke about merchants, now we want to talk about eaters as well. Today, we're introducing green packaging, a new way to easily find and choose restaurants that are more sustainable packaging. All of us here are consumers. In the feed, you'll be able to see an option that featuring restaurants that have sustainable packaging, made from reusable, recyclable, compostable materials. All of us can make those selections. You can also find these restaurants through one of our search categories. And when you make a greener choice, we'll send you a message to thank you for doing the right thing for our planet. Starting this week, we're launching in 6 major cities and we'll expand globally as more restaurants go green. It's the beginning of many, many years of innovation for Uber Eats. As head of products, I'm so inspired by the possibilities. Today, Uber provides more electric rides than any mobility platform in North America and Europe. Imagine the impact we can have in the future as we bring the power of our technology to address the climate crisis in over 70 countries in which we operate. Our platform, ours will be zero emissions, a low waste platform that supports livable cities by making it effortless to go green across all of these various constituents. Now, I know this is really ambitious. We're not there yet, and we certainly can't do this alone. We need strong government leadership to get there. We need many more companies stepping up and learning from each other. But we're on our way. We've accomplished quite a bit, but it's still very early for us. And our promise to you and all the people that we serve globally is we won't stop till zero. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here in London at Go Get Zero. I'm Jill Hazelbaker, and I lead our marketing and public affairs. And I am delighted to be joined today by Edward Norton, whom all of you will know as a highly acclaimed actor, a 3-time Academy Award nominee, a winner of a Golden Globe, and a lifelong, committed, passionate environmentalist. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure, yeah.
So what you may not know about Edward is that he was actually our very first Uber customer in Los Angeles. We call them Uber Rider Zero internally. So can you tell me about that first Uber trip?
I took a Suburban to go surfing. I think we thought that was an appropriate use of the first Uber ride. I took a longboard out to First Point, Malibu, which was symbolic but fun. And actually that was much long after my first Uber ride. I started using Uber Cab. It was called in San Francisco way back. And I remember proselytizing about it to people because I'm a 30-year New Yorker who literally has a vitriolic loathing of the New York taxi system. Mike Bloomberg told me once that he was going to appoint me the Taxi and Limousine Commission chairman to help him reform things. I was a bit of a zealot. I was a zealot, and I really did. I'll credit myself with only that. I really felt that the whole idea of on-demand ride-hail was in fact really transformative, and not just in a simple convenience sense, but in a really socially positive and necessary sense. Because, you know, if you've lived in New York for decades, our taxi system is not nearly as progressive and beloved as it is here in London, let's just say that. And I think the whole idea, the waste of human capital, of people standing on streets, vying with each other, looking for an empty car that's driving around spewing fumes out of a Crown Vic, you know, with an indentured servant driving who's renting a 12-hour lease. The whole thing was just garbage. It was a garbage system. It was environmentally terrible. It was terrible for drivers. It was terrible for riders. And I really felt, and when I look at this, the presentation you guys just gave here, I think it is an incredible affirmation of things that we all thought in those days, which is that this will take a lot of iteration to evolve and refine into the best version of itself. But from inception, the baseline that it was taking on, sometimes I think you do something really bold, like what Uber did and has done, and people are going to take swings at you, right? Because there's going to be in
Uber's
the 1.0
never had
version,
anyone
the
taking
tube,
swings at
never,
them. Never,
really,
no, not my tenure.
I was there. And fair enough. Like if when you're going to make, you know, radical changes to systems, you're going to take knocks, and learning is necessary. But we should never forget how truly degraded the baseline was prior to this, and how much potential, if you want to see the potential that we thought sat within it, you just have to look, I think it was just got presented here, because it is the idea that this kind of this positive feedback loop, all the potentiality in this different kind of relationship between people needing to get somewhere and the drivers who are taking them there. I think now you're seeing the 2.0, 3.0, and there's so much more in front of this, and that was just never possible within this broken system that we had. And I think it's just incredibly exciting to see the ecological dimension. There was already an ecologically beneficial dimension to marrying supply and demand. Wow, like not having empty cars going around looking for riders. But this, I think, this is really, I was really knocked out by that. I think it's really exciting.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think it's such an important point that you touch on in terms of stumbles. You've been around the technology industry for a long time now, not just companies like ours, but I know you're mentors to so many other founders at Rivian and others. And can you talk a little bit about that, about technology's impact on this space and how you think it can help leapfrog and really solve some of these problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, if you think about the questions and critiques of the whole idea of ride-hail 10 years ago, even, or more, and then you look at this, you realize, we've seen in the last, let's call it the last 50 years of assessing our environmental, our ecological, global ecological reality, right? We've realized that some people were shouting about it in the 70s, but today, in 2023, we are seeing the second order and third order negative effects of our actions in ways that most people weren't paying attention to today. 50 years ago.
Look,
John F. Kennedy Airport is closed today because of fires in Canada.
Yeah.
Absolutely, like we thought this was a West Coast problem, right? You can't go outside. Kids are inside today with worse air quality than Delhi in New York City. And
worst air quality in the world.
Yeah, and so, but on the flip, I think what you also have to contemplate is that when you take actions, when you move to try to push, say, the adoption of EVs at a big global scale on the kind of platform that you guys have, there are lots of positive second order and third order effects that aren't even being discussed here today. And I'll just give you an example of something that was going through my mind. The guy who founded Rivian, the great US electric truck company, is a friend of mine. And I proudly showed him the other day that I've got 13 kilowatts of solar on a roof of a home. I've got 20 kilowatts of battery backup, in these new modern batteries. And that I was charging my EVs off the roof, and this new smart grid batteries and all these things. And he made this point to me, which is, he said, what did you pay for 20 kilowatts of storage? Fully installed, 25 grand US or something like that. A Rivian EV is 150 kilowatts of storage, right? The average family in the and you look at this network of 60,000 EVs. The average family within a couple years that has 2 EVs in the driveway instead of 2 ICE cars potentially could be looking at 300 kilowatts of storage sitting in their driveway. And this network is going to be gigawatts. Uber, at some point, Uber's drivers will represent gigawatts of distributed energy storage, so that when people talk about these macro problems like grid scale and grid transmission bottleneck to get renewable energy to urban centers, all this kind of stuff, I don't hear enough discussion about what
bottoms up.
Yeah, the distributed approach, which is that distributed energy collection, which cities like London are really taking on. EVs represent distributed storage at a completely unanticipated and uncalculated level that we haven't even begun to do the math on what that means. Rivian and Ford both come out next year with the dual directional charger, so that your car in your driveway plugged in will back up your house for a week. You know what I mean? And what does it mean to have gigawatts of mobile storage moving around in urban environments that, when plugged in, are backing up the grid.
So
So in a way, you got to acknowledge that this is great for all the reasons you just saw here, but it's also starting to build the base of the pyramid of something we haven't even really begun to contemplate, which is that a large-scale global EV network represents a revolution in energy storage.
So as you can tell, Edward knows a little bit about this, just a touch. And one of the things that we talk about a lot internally is how do we make this topic accessible for people who are brand new to it? And a lot of our drivers, this is their first job when they arrive in a country, a large immigrant population on our platform. Big effort, of course, to get them into electric vehicles and to clean and green our fleet. And so how do you make this idea that you're talking about accessible to them? And how can we really partner? Who should we be partnering with? How do we help them? And then, of course, I want you to tell the audience about your experience with your Rivian truck, which I thought you
Sure.
Great.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm on the board of the largest U.S. solar finance company, and it's called Good Leap, and it's a software-enabled platform that helps contractors take the many dimensions of solar, other forms of home efficiency, and package them so that homeowners can make an obvious and easy binary decision for a financially preferential option. People can't do the math on 10 points of potential financial efficiency, right?
Right.
And more, I think what we're seeing is exactly what you showed up here, which is help people get to a simple binary decision around an obvious choice for a preferential economic outcome, right? And I think really key is total cost of ownership. With EVs, total cost of ownership has got to be, and the press needs to write about it more too.
Well, they're all here, so
no,
you'll
frankly,
have a chance to talk
there's
to them.
not nearly enough real analysis of total cost of ownership, because, you know, and take like I'm a big fan of these Rivians. I think I was impressed by, you know, I've never been more impressed by the engineering achievement of an EV than that Rivian truck. It is absolutely phenomenal, but you know, and that might not be the most obvious Uber vehicle, but somewhere it will be. Somewhere it will be. But you know, you say to yourself, like, okay, that's a $75,000 base truck, and some people say, oh, you know, it's expensive. First of all, if you think Americans are not spending $75,000 on their Ford Raptors, like, you're crazy. Those are $90,000 trucks, $100,000 trucks. Like, people are putting themselves into irresponsible levels of debt to get into F-150s and all these other things, right? So it's actually not as out of market as people are trying to tag it with. But when you contemplate that on trucks, the average fill today at $4 or $5 gas is $150
Gas
per
prices
fill.
going up, not down.
Then the 5-year cost of ownership of that truck is $20,000 to $25,000 more than the list price. So whether you want to say the Rivian gave you $25,000 back within 5 years, or that the other one cost you, it's an absolute no-brainer, you know. And fuel prices are only going up. The only thing I think is really interesting that I didn't see in there is the idea of how you educate people on, you know, the directional trend movement of prices, like, because they're buying into a savings, model now, but likely it's only going to get better and better as energy prices go up, and fuel prices go up. So I think that total cost of ownership and the ability to see that easily for people is the key.
Make that accessible.
It's the key.
It's so helpful. And certainly we have work to do there. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about Extrapolation, which is an environmental themed anthology that's currently streaming on Apple TV. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. Edward is one of the many actors who is set in it. It's interesting because it starts off in the year 2037, and it kicks off with a group of policymakers and world leaders coming together to talk about how to attack this climate crisis. And of course, as we discussed, we woke up all of us to images like this in New York City today due to the wildfires that are raging across Canada. And I just want to ask you, as a New Yorker and a Californian, what do you think when you see these images?
You know, I mean, the American West has been burning, you know, every year now for years, and it's, my brother and I talk about it, it's like you almost just come to accept that there's a fire season now.
Yes.
in the American West. The idea that that's hitting and why we would accept that.
Right.
Like why we would like
our kids indoors
drive on cruise control into this
Yes.
dystopian future in which in Silicon Valley, the air quality is, in the hundreds of particulate, and but one of the things I think people should take in with this is Canadian wildfires, like this is Quebec, and it's hard to really wrap your mind around the scale of the fuel bomb that the Canadian boreal forest represents, or the Russian boreal forest. You start to imagine those forests burning, and we are living in a dystopian hell very quickly. And what's crazy about making, Extrapolations is written by Scott Burns, who's, wrote Contagion
Yes.
and lots of other really terrifically kind of science-based horror stories. But what I really liked about what he did is he approached it kind of like almost like the Black Mirror of
Yes.
environmental
Yes.
consequences as opposed to technological consequences. And he started it. There's things in the show that are wonderfully rooted in real science and beautifully realized and imagined to give you a glimpse, an almost emotional glimpse of what our
Yes.
lives might be like on different dimensions. But some of what he depicts, we knew that it was coming, but literally he put it at 2037,
Yes.
and it's happening today in
Yes.
New York. It's like
Yes.
it's like we're actually, for the real world to be accelerating ahead of Hollywood is a bad situation.
Terrifying.
Like Hollywood usually does a pretty good job at imagining disasters beyond what they actually are, asteroids and things like that. For the world to be eclipsing Hollywood's imaginative capacities is really unsettling.
And it's really interesting to watch because it's a drama, not a documentary, and there are all these character-driven actors that you love and identify with, and it just lends itself to a different type.
Yeah, it's
type
very
of storytelling.
provocative. I really I don't usually do things. I've generally felt that documentary format is a better way to communicate about serious issues like these.
And this
But I
changed
really
your
thought
view?
Scott addressed this in ways that would be provocative in a good way. And Meryl Streep's in it, and Marion Cotillard, and lots
Sienna
of
Miller
amazing
for the British
people.
crowd.
Yeah.
So, your father is a legendary environmental attorney, so you grew up steeped in this. And I'm just curious about the dinner table conversation at the Norton household growing up and how that impacted and kind of changed your thinking on these issues.
In England, you guys have the phrase "to the manor born." All of the kids in our family essentially were, required to enter environmental advocate, indoctrinated. I was kind of the black sheep by even choosing, to moonlight in a creative career. And
it's married now. They must be so proud.
No, my dad. My dad is amazing. He was a great litigator, one of the leading innovators in terms of going from, I think, arguing in op-eds to save the Grand Canyon, and basically taking it to the courts. He sued the Reagan EPA over and over again very effectively. And I did grow up. I grew up with environmental bumper stickers on the Volvo, and my brother's a fisheries expert and dam removal advocate, and my sister works in sustainable ag, and it's just.
Are you carrying the indoctrination in your household now?
Oh,
You're
for sure.
a parent yourself.
For sure.
How do you walk the walk? What's the
my son? I was very proud when at one point my wife said to me, we were late for something. She goes, step on the gas, and my son leaned out of his car seat and went, "Step on the electricity, you mean?" He told our contractor that his Lincoln Navigator was evil for the earth when he was 5. So yeah, I just couldn't be more proud. But
that's amazing.
Look, I think that people, I get frustrated when I see people, giving friction to Greta Thunberg and young people and saying they're being strident.
Yes.
I mean, JFK is closed today because of fires in Canada. It's like, if we're not strident, F off. Like young people should be strident. They should be mad. They should be loud, and because we are way, way, way behind. We are way behind. We have been practicing short-term quarterly report thinking
Yes.
for way too long, and the external costs have got to come internal to the financial system. We can't socialize these costs anymore, and we can't have business models that externalize their environmental impacts and try to pretend that that's an authentic market.
I'm really glad that you raised this because, of course, we're talking a lot about the positive impacts that companies can have on these issues and people like you who are advocates and giving their life to this. But there's obviously another side that's quite entrenched and has a particular point of view. And you're an actor, an artist, and a storyteller. And how do you think about messaging in that world so that you can convert and you can bring people who maybe are hearing a very different oppositional perspective?
Well, look, I mean, the good news, I think, is that I think there.
Do you think your side is winning?
I think that reasonable minds are absorbing and accepting that these negative impacts are real and are realizing that we're in a moment where we have to decide how hard are we going to punch ourselves in the face. How hard a punch is it going to take? How bad are the consequences going to have to be before we start to really move with purpose on this stuff? And I think whenever you read about tipping point moments and negative feedback loops and thresholds that if we go beyond these things, it sounds very dire. To me, what gives me optimism is that, number one, in truth, our consciousness has accelerated very fast. By any standard of human existence, we actually have absorbed the data and realized what we're doing in the blink of an eye, in any sort of historical sense. And there have been lots of times, forget our grandparents, if we go to our own youths and we remember what our interaction with technology was, and we look at what's going on today, there is no way we could have imagined when we were teenagers in high school what the world was going to look like now. It would have sounded like science fiction. And I think we have to credit ourselves with a capacity to do things over the next 50 years that we are barely imagining now. Our technological and innovation capacity, gives me hope. I think that the means by which we'll not just stop but remediate our negative impacts, we're only beginning to invent. And I think our capacity when we really set ourselves to a problem is pretty phenomenal. But we've each got to go at it. Companies have got to go at it within their core competencies. That's what's really cool to see within this. I think that I said this at a conference last year. There are things that there are debates going on. I'll tell you one that I disagree. With respect, I disagree with sort of the Guardian here. The assault on sort of the whole idea of forest carbon credits and offsets. I think companies that have aspects of their business, like flying people around on planes, that cannot currently be.
This man walks the walk. He was on this within the first 5 minutes.
You need.
How are you doing on offsets?
I think offsets. I think recognizing that offsets are voluntary. We don't have a regulatory framework, so companies aren't quote unquote cheating on anything. It's purely voluntary. Of course, the certification standards need to keep getting better and more sophisticated, more and more credible. We were at 1.0. We're probably at 2.0 on certification standards now, but we're headed. Uber in 2010 did not look like this. Okay, if we had thrown out the idea of rideshare because of the things that weren't perfect about it, if we had thrown out all ideas about micro-lending, these things need time to iterate and evolve. And the certification standards around different forms of carbon sequestration, offset values, tradable assets, all these things, we have got to allow that to iterate. It's got to be allowed to get better. And you can't just throw the baby. My issue with The Guardian's take on it was it conveniently, in the scathing review of offsets, it left off some very important components, which is number one, direct emission capture and control gets $100 a ton right now. Forest carbon credits get about 10. So there's a huge price discounting already being factored into, and essentially a quality, like bond rating, right? There's already a massive price discounting in there, and they don't really talk about the variable pricing and the acknowledgement of sort of the softer standards or the still evolving standards versus direct emission capture and control, right? But the other thing is nobody addresses the fact that this is just voluntary, and of course corporations need to be careful when you say go to zero and carbon neutrality. Greenwashing is a real thing, but we got to allow some room for that conversation to evolve. Like, I think that when corporations are taking voluntary actions
it should be a
to address components of their business that they can't just do in terms of evolving business practice, that they got to think. I can tell you from having developed a carbon project myself that is a rebuttal to every one of those critiques. And has very successfully driven real value into communities and into mitigation efforts around threats to specific forest assets. There are many AAA projects out there. The critiques are very fair and very important and very positive because they will force that evolution. But there's got to be, I think we got to be a little bit more patient.
Space.
We got to give space for that conversation to continue to evolve, because post Davos about 2 years ago, the huge uptick in corporate willingness and interest to engage with offsets was a net positive. Whatever the ones that under audit need to be critiqued, and there will be many, we really do ourselves a disservice to throw out that modality, I think.
So we're obviously doing a lot at Uber because we believe that we can have a direct and tangible and demonstrable impact here. What are the three things that you say, offset's one of them, but that companies should be doing?
Well, for instance, like aviation, maybe we get lithium sulfide batteries with the weight to everything, and we really get to electric aviation in the next couple decades, but we're not there now.
Right.
And no matter what type of business you are, you can be the most like carbon light software business that only uses renewables on your data centers or whatever. If you fly people around by planes, you got a footprint, right? The current cost of offsetting, and let's just assume that it's in high grade, highly certified, ways, it's a rounding error, right? And in fact, one of the things I say is the volume you buy is less important than the price you buy at, because there are actors in the world like BP who have willfully tried to suppress the price of carbon offset assets, actually buy them and not retire them, hold them in hedge funds to perversely drive the value of their held assets up through their own business model. If a company buying 100,000 offset credits at 15 a ton, I would argue is better than buying 200,000 credits at 8 a ton, because we need price signaling. We need corporate voluntary leadership using the offset modality to actually underwrite the projects at the true costs of the mitigation, and that ain't $6 a ton. It's like 15 a ton. There's a lot of good. My friend who was the head of sustainability at Microsoft said internally he would never charge under 15 a ton because it's inauthentic, and they know that they're not actually underwriting in the modes of offset that they're doing. I would say a real easy, like everybody should do it, action is no corporation that flies people around on planes should not quantify that tonnage and buy offsets to
every report is writing this down to
at like a minimum of 15 a ton.
Yeah.
I would argue it should be more like 18 a ton, because and you can say if you want to counter some of the critiques, it's like purchase at a meaningful market making price that helps really move the underwriting that's needed to the good projects, and there are many that are out there.
I want to, I know we're up against time. I want to just close with two questions, really. One, you're a UN Goodwill Ambassador, have been for a very long time. So you travel all over the
For
world.
biodiversity, yeah.
For biodiversity.
Yeah.
So you travel all over the world. You talk to world leaders, to members of the private sector. What is the most surprising thing that we don't know about that's actually happening that you're excited about?
That's an interesting question. I mean, we talked about this idea of I'm not just saying it because we're at an Uber event where
Yes.
you made this presentation. I literally, in Stockholm next week at the Brilliant Minds conference, I'm going to talk with the founder of Rivian about this context of the idea of EVs as mobile storage and potentially grid scale
Really
storage,
cool.
because that to me was I pride myself on being reading these things. I was like, that just melted my mind. I really like the whole idea, and the ramifications of that melted my mind. And I think things like that really excite me. When you, like I said, second order effects. When you go, we know EVs are a positive. There's things we got to figure out about EVs too. Where's that power coming from? But when you suddenly start thinking of it as gigawatts of mobile storage, like wow, that's really wild, right? I think. The broader answer to that question is that I think that, and this sort of connects it back to my dad, I think that you could make the argument that if you start with like Teddy Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot and the beginning of the American conservation movement, John Muir, right? Kind of who's the North Star of the American environmental consciousness. You could say that the first 100 years of advocacy for the environment mostly used the value of the intrinsic value of nature, the spiritual value of nature, and the intrinsic value of wild places, landscapes, and biodiversity. We said wildlife to try to activate people's emotions around it as the main lever to get people engaged, right? And lots of great, important interventionist work was done to set aside ecological assets. Unfortunately, it just didn't work. It fundamentally didn't work, because in 2023, 100 years on, every single major indicator of global environmental health is moving
in the wrong direction.
Rapidly in the wrong direction. Biodiversity loss is accelerating, fisheries are collapsing, acidification of ocean, atmospheric carbon, all of it is moving in the wrong direction. I think that the recognition, I would argue the next 100 years, that when you say what's a good thing that's happening,
yes,
I think there has been a fundamental shift of tactic and of awareness, and that is to move this from an intrinsic value to an economic value analysis. And if you look at people like my friend Pavan Sukhdev, who he was the head of commodities trading for Deutsche Bank in Asia, right? He ended up having this dark night of the soul where his daughter asked him, why don't air and water have a cost? And he said, well, because they're free. And he knew it wasn't true. And he ended up writing the TEEB report, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity for the UN. We are in the era in which ecological asset value has to be quantified, and it is getting quantified. And now people, even down to a community level, even down to a driver level, the way we're going to win this is to understand that it's not just that we've allowed our industrial economy to socialize its authentic costs, and that we are going to insist on the internalization of environmental costs to actually assess the viability of a business model, but that now ecological sustainability represents the biggest financial investment opportunity of our lifetimes. The next 100 years, I think the biggest fortunes in the world will be made in transforming our economy and our business practices. The businesses that get ahead of this will thrive, and the businesses that lag will die. And I think that is a shift that's happened in my adult lifetime. I've seen it go from, and I'm glad you're working with WWF, but I will say, like, the WWF symbol is the panda, right? That's how we used to try to activate people, and we really can't do it that way anymore. We've got to win this argument in the ministries of finance, right? People have got to understand that, like, tearing down Bangladeshi mangrove swamps for shrimp farming delivers notional GDP for about a couple years, and then it's negative GDP for decades after that. And as we start to do those kinds of analyses, I think that's where we stand to maybe succeed at this. And I think that's really positive. And when you say traveling around the world, I see that at the community level. I've worked in Maasai communities in southern Kenya for 20-something years. Drought, climate change is creating huge beta in drought cycles there. And if you're a pastoralist community that's entire economy is in cattle, since 2009 they've had 3 events where 90% of the asset value of their cattle was lost. Wow. Right? That is just one area of the world. Between carbon credits, between ecotourism development, between all kinds of alternative landscape, natural resource collateralization models, communities are starting to realize they have a more resilient and preferential economic opportunity through asset management. And people are starting to grasp that this isn't just tree huggers coming in and saying, or lion lovers, or elephant lovers, coming in and saying, you need to change the way you live to protect these iconic macrofauna species. No.
It's economic viability.
It is a more resilient and viable economic future to be good stewards of these assets. And I think that is penetrating to the community level. And I think that we're doing that analysis. I think that's the new standard in which this argument is ultimately going to be won. The question is, like, how long are we going to privilege sort of, Jack Welch quarterly earnings capitalism and allow it to, and allow for that kind of short-term thinking to literally keep burning us. But I'm optimistic. I think that shift
is happening.
That shift is happening, yeah.
So I'm going to just close. I know that you're a Hemingway fan. I know you grew up with a framed Hemingway quote in your dad's office. And it says, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." And I think that whether you agree or disagree with everything that Edward has to say, that is a perfect summation of what you are trying to do. And thank you so much.
Great, yeah. And I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
And keep fighting.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.